Abortion in America. Democrats are pushing back against the overturning of Roe versus Wade, both on Capitol Hill and in digital media. We have the latest. White House diplomacy. As President Joe Biden prepares to travel to the Middle East, he first hosts the leader of Mexico. Crisis in Sri Lanka. New developments as the South Asian nation fights continued protests and a plummeting economy. And a first glimpse. The project manager for the James Webb Space Telescope tells us about the stunning images being sent back from outer space. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, July 12th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. A federal judge has blocked a measure in Arizona to give all legal rights to unborn children. Abortion providers said the provision was vague and could lead to criminal charges. At least 4 other states have similar personhood laws. Well, the rush is on in the House of Representatives. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi wants to quickly pass several bills to protect so-called abortion rights. She says that they are needed after the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has the latest.
Self-proclaimed Catholic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told colleagues that lawmakers will once again take up the Women's Health Protection Act, which is essentially abortion on demand. And that's not all. Democrats want to pass a bill that will ensure the privacy of women using health apps to seek abortions in states without protections, and another bill which reiterates women have the constitutional right to travel freely to any state to seek an abortion. In the Senate, the Judiciary Committee took a deeper look at the effects of the justice's decision regarding Roe. Both sides condemned recent attacks on churches and pro-life pregnancy care centers.
Threatening justices, pregnancy centers, and churches is not the answer. I hope the extreme rhetoric that gives rise to this violence won't be a part of our conversation.
I condemn all violence and threats of violence in the strongest possible terms, whether the targets are pregnancy counseling centers or abortion clinics, period. Violence is never an appropriate form of protest.
Pro-life organizations say the justice's decision was a win for the Constitution.
The late pro-abortion icon Justice Ginsburg called Roe a heavy-handed judicial intervention that was difficult to justify. And legally, scientifically, morally, it is.
Every community needs a place for women facing unplanned pregnancies who are seeking dependable medical resources in a safe, caring environment during one of the most difficult times of their lives.
While pro-abortion supporters say the decision created 2 nations.
One, where those whose reproductive freedom belongs to themselves, and another whose reproductive freedom belongs to a small group of politicians who have effectively appointed themselves as decision makers over our bodies, our lives, and our futures.
In the coming days, the Senate Judiciary Committee will hold more hearings regarding Roe. Meanwhile, the Democratic National Committee just launched a 6-figure ad campaign. They claim that Republicans are trying to outlaw abortion nationwide. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Now, President Joe Biden heads to the Middle East. First stop, Israel, then Saudi Arabia. One huge item on the agenda, Iran. The nation is believed to be closer than ever to having the ability to build a nuclear weapon. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, the president leaves for the Middle East later tonight. More on that in a moment. But first, earlier today, President Biden welcomed President Andreas Lopez Obrador of Mexico, who you may recall skipped the Summit of the Americas last month in Los Angeles, essentially blowing off the White House. Today, President Biden said addressing migration is a hemispheric challenge.
In the Oval Office, President Joe Biden and President Andrés Manuel López Obrador of Mexico.
As I told you from the beginning, and I mean this, we see Mexico as an equal partner.
The meeting between the 2 leaders comes as the administration is taken to task by critics, pointing to immigrants crossing the southern U.S. border illegally and the White House not doing more to curb migration.
We are accelerating our efforts to disrupt the trafficking of fentanyl and other drugs that are literally killing We've had a major anti-smuggling operation underway since April, targeting human smugglers who traffic in people, drugs, and weapons.
Meanwhile, in just hours, the president departs for Israel, where in Jerusalem, workers have been putting up U.S. flags alongside Israeli flags. The administration has struggled to rejuvenate the controversial Iran nuclear deal.
We continue to want to see a nuclear deal that takes Iran's nuclear ambitions, at least nuclear weapons ambitions, off the table. And there is a deal. There's a deal actually on the table. The onus is on Iran now to accept it.
Also, COVID-19 and the highly transmissible variants BA4 and BA5. The Biden administration urging renewed caution.
For people who are 50 years of age or older, my message is simple. If you have not gotten a vaccine shot in the year 2022, if you have not gotten one this year, please go get another vaccine shot.
And the First Lady is apologizing after saying Latinos are as unique as San Antonio breakfast tacos. Her spokesperson tweets, the First Lady apologizes that her words conveyed anything but pure admiration and love for the Latino community.
Also tonight, President Biden announced that the U.S. military killed a top ISIS leader in an airstrike in Syria. And separately, as the president heads overseas, the White House is bracing for the latest inflation numbers, which of course have been pounding Americans for months now. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The Secretary General of Mexico's Catholic bishops is defending a 5-decade record of condemning violence in that nation. The bishop cites conference documents which decry the impacts of organized crime. Mexico's president had accused the bishops of hypocritical silence during his predecessor's tenure. And for more details, including the specific statements, visit our online partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. While thousands attend the funeral for assassinated former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Mourners in Tokyo cried out at the passing hearse carrying the body of the slain former leader. At the Parliament building, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and other officials bowed in respect. Amid continued protests over a failed economy, lawmakers in Sri Lanka say that they will elect a new president next week. Sri Lanka's presidential palace was opened for the public to visit and to view today. Large crowds marveled at its luxury. Meanwhile, lawmakers must debate the makeup of the new government as the South Asian nation battles bankruptcy and political turmoil. Coming up, a closer look at President Joe Biden's important trip to the Middle East. As we reported earlier, President Joe Biden is visiting the Middle East. Over the next 3 days, the president will visit Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the West Bank. In an op-ed published in the Washington Post, the president defended his decision to visit Saudi Arabia, saying, quote, "From the start, my aim was to reorient but not rupture relations with a country that has been a strategic partner for 80 years. The president also mentioned the country is helping to stabilize oil markets. And joining me now is Clare Lopez, president of Lopez Liberty LLC. Clare, welcome back. Always so great to be with you. Let's talk a little bit more about President Biden's upcoming trip to the Middle East. What do you think will come from this trip, and why do you think that he felt the need to defend his visit to Saudi Arabia?
Well, beginning with the last one first in Saudi Arabia, he's going there for one reason and one reason only, and that is to beg the Saudis to pump more oil. Because here at home in the United States, the Biden administration refuses to reopen our own energy sector. Previously, of course, President Biden had criticized the Crown Prince in particular, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS as he's called, specifically over the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, the Muslim Brotherhood supporter in Istanbul, Turkey, back in, I think it was 2020. And so that will be a very important stop. I don't think there'll be much coming from Saudi Arabia, though. However, because as President Macron of France spoke into an open mic, apparently, at the G7 meeting not so long ago, the Saudis already are pumping at practically full capacity. They don't have much more capacity to be able to pump more.
Yeah, and Claire, another thing I want to talk about is Iran. That country continues to strengthen its military capabilities by building ballistic missiles and stockpiling uranium. That said, Tehran says that its weapons are important for deterrence. I want to get your thoughts on that and what that could mean to the security of that region and also the world.
Well, I mean, let's be realistic about this. The Iranians have been driving for a deliverable nuclear weapon since the Ayatollah Khomeini himself, back before his death in 1988, commanded his IRGC to essentially get the bomb. They have been working in clandestine areas off limits to IAEA inspections ever since. The Iranian opposition group, the National Council of Resistance of Iran, blew the lid off that clandestine program back in 2002 with public press conferences and satellite imagery. The Iranians have never stopped. They've been set back. They've been stymied in their quest for a deliverable nuclear weapon, but it remains their objective, and we should have no doubts about that. Neither a renewal of the nuclear deal, the JCPOA, or any other kind of abject appeasement will change that fact. I think Israel is fully aware of that. Of course, they're in the direct bullseye target of the Iranian regime, which chants death to Israel on a regular basis.
Before we run out of time, Claire, I want to talk about the op-ed that you wrote discussing how the assassination of Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe could be considered prepping the battlefield for China to invade Taiwan. Tell us more about this and why you say that.
Well, when I heard the news first at the end of last week about the assassination of Japanese former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, it reminded me immediately of the assassination of Ahmed Shah Massoud, leader of the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan, just days before 9/11. Shah Massoud would have led the Afghan forces to join up with the American and NATO forces that Iran, of course, knew immediately, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban too, would be coming to Afghanistan after 9/11. Taking him, Ahmed Shah Massoud, off the battlefield, I thought was similar to what has been done now with Shinzo Abe. The investigation, of course, continues into the exact circumstances of that assassination. But Shinzo Abe was a leading figure, not just in the Japanese Democratic Liberation. The Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. But he was also an outspoken leader of Japan in general and of the Southeast Asian region, where he continuously was warning about a Chinese threat, which is not just to Taiwan, but certainly according to the May 14th leaked audio tape of the leadership meeting that took place in Beijing that day, a threat against the entire presence of Japanese, American, and any other allied shipping in the South China Sea, which China intends to clear out. So he spoke openly despite warnings from the Chinese regime. And in my opinion, was taken off the scene in the same way that Ahmed Shah Massoud was, preparation of the battlefield, because he would have been a leader to rally the forces when, if, should Beijing launch that attack long anticipated against Taiwan.
Oh, Claire, so much more we can talk about. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you, as always, for your insights. Always appreciated. Up next, the project manager for the James Webb Space Telescope tells us about the new and awe-inspiring photos from outer space. Pope Francis has appointed the Bishop of Fairbanks, Alaska, to lead the Diocese of New Ulm, Minnesota. Bishop Chad Zielinski will shepherd the estimated 51,000 Catholics who reside in the diocese located southwest of Minneapolis. Bishop Zielinski is a native of Detroit, Michigan, and served for more than a decade as an Air Force chaplain. An initiative to improve communications for the church is turning 25 years old. The Pontifical University of the Holy Cross runs the program and has helped to train hundreds of people. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Thonhauser recently spoke with the dean of the school to learn more about the program and what comes next.
We're here on the rooftop of the Santa Croce University in the heart of Rome, right next to Piazza Navona. With me is Daniel Arasa, the Dean of the School of Church Communications of Santa Croce, which is celebrating this year its 25th anniversary. Mr. Arasa, can you tell us a little bit more about the School of Church Communication?
When we were born 25 years ago, there were no communications offices in many church institutions, so we realized that there was a need for that. So we are trying to form people that will be in charge of communications for church institutions, bishops' conferences, dioceses, religious congregations, also in the non-profit, and also covering the church as journalists. But there is a need for professionalization, and this is what we are trying to offer here.
In an age of digitalization, what are the most important things that you are teaching your students today?
Essentially, many of the things are the same because the history of the church, the contents, the teachings of the church are always the same. But certainly the time change, communications change, and we need to offer, for example, a better understanding of the culture of dialogue in the digitalized world, where there is the social media and there is an intense debate. Sometimes we have to offer them and to help them to know how to listen, how to accept criticism, to offer feedback, etc.
What do you feel are the most important things that the church needs to communicate today and in the next 25 years?
One of the elements, probably one of the most important, is the culture of dialogue. We are in a society very polarized, not just because of the war, which certainly is a manifestation, a cruel manifestation of this polarization, but in politics, in society, in the economy. And the church can be an example of dialogue. Certainly needs to improve also and applies this culture of dialogue within the church. But I think the Pope is trying to do this, for example, with the Synod, but with many other actions, and probably this is one of the most important things in communications for the church in the next years.
You also engage in research projects. Can you tell us a little bit more about the academic side, the scientific side of the school here?
Of course, as a school of communications, we try also to improve and to develop research. We created in 2006 a journal, Church Communication and Culture. It's a journal in English, open access journal, published by Routledge. And with these journals, we try, I think it's very interesting the name of the journal. These three elements, church, communication, and culture, are like a triad that shows the nature and the interdisciplinary approach of the journal. Still in some environments, church communications is seen as something churchy, preachy, just for priests, which is not true at all. And we want with this journal and with our research to put the church communications discipline at the same level of any other social science.
Daniel Arasa, thank you so much. A very important topic today, not only here in Rome, but around the world, communicating the gospel, communicating the church. Thank you.
And finally tonight, NASA's new space telescope has unveiled the deepest look of the cosmos ever captured. The first image was released yesterday during an event at the White House, followed by 4 more shots today. Part of the image is light from not too long after the Big Bang, a theory that was developed by a Catholic priest. The James Webb Space Telescope has been decades in the making. And joining us now to discuss is Bill Ochs, project manager for the James Webb Space Telescope. Bill, welcome back. So great to see you. Wow, this is really exciting stuff here. Tell us more about the photos that were released this morning. What are we seeing in these just incredible images?
So the idea behind these images, they're called early release observations. is not so much do science, but demonstrate the capabilities of Webb. I've been telling folks all along, if Webb is a Lamborghini, we're really still in first gear. We're still learning about it. We're going to push more and more and get ourselves up to fifth gear here over the next few months. So what you're seeing today is a demonstration of some of our different science modes. For example, the deep field image, that's the deepest we've ever been able to see. And the exposure length is kind of equivalent of like Hubble did, where Hubble took almost 2 weeks to make that exposure. We spent about 5 to 7 hours making that same exposure. But you could see in that one image that the one galaxy was back 13.1 billion years. So we're seeing light from 13.1 billion years ago. Over the next couple of months, we'll actually see back farther. And eventually we'll get back to about 13.5 billion years.
Wow, it's so hard to grasp that, too. I mean, it just really is unbelievable. And I understand that we're only getting just a very small window into space through these photos. Bill, can you tell us a little bit more about the scale of what we're seeing?
Sure. I'll start again with the deep field image because I think is probably the best when we start talking scale. So if you wanted to understand what part of the sky you were seeing, and last night when they revealed that image, they talked about the size of a grain of sand. It's not quite that small, but if you took a dime, held it up, and you saw FDR's face, and then you see FDR's eye, his eye is about the size of the field of view that we looked at, just to see all those galaxies that you saw today, looking back in time. So that kind of gives you a sense of scale of, look at just what we're seeing. There's probably 200, 300 galaxies just in that one picture, maybe even more. Now you know the average size of a galaxy is 100 million to 300 million stars. So now you do that math, and it gets even a huger number for just that part of the sky. The other images that we showed, I think the other amazing one is the exoplanet one, where we looked at this planet around a star that's about the size of our sun. The planet is about the size of Saturn with the mass of Jupiter. This particular planet, it transitions the entire planet, goes around the entire planet in 3 days. So it's moving going around that planet. But we saw the signature of water on that planet. So it's water vapor, steam, but we saw that signature on that planet. That kind of gives you a sense of what Webb is going to be able to do.
Wow. And, you kind of touched on it before, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about maybe how this telescope differs from other space telescopes like the Hubble.
Okay. Yeah, we talk about Hubble all the time. I think the two main differences are, one, we look at a different part of the light spectrum. So to see the type of things that we saw today, we have to look in the infrared. As light travels through the universe, light waves start to elongate. And when they elongate, they go from the visible light that we all see every day into the infrared part of the light spectrum. So that's why it's important for us to be able to look back in time in the infrared. So that's one of the big differences with us and Hubble. But the other really is obviously the size. Our primary mirror, it has 7 times the light collecting capability of a Hubble mirror, of the Hubble primary mirror. In addition, the advancements in the detectors in our science instruments, combine that with the mirror, makes us about 100 times more powerful than the Hubble telescope. And you saw some of that today.
Yeah. Wow, incredible. Before I let you go, I know we're running out of time, but I'm curious, Bill, I know when I saw these images, I was just in awe. Curious what you thought when you saw them, and also what's next for the James Webb Space Telescope.
It was pretty awe-inspiring. And I worked Hubble, and I was there after the first servicing mission, and we started releasing the images with all the optics collected, and they were amazing. But these just blew me away when I saw the preview a couple of weeks ago. Then as far as where Webb goes now, we've now started what's called Cycle 1. Cycle 1 is the first year of operations, and we know what we're going to be observing during that time frame. We are now fully into doing those observations. But the next big event is what we call early release science observations. So here's where we actually really do science. And typically on any astronomical mission, a scientist and their team will have typically 4 to 6 months to analyze that data before it goes public. With our early release science, that science data goes out immediately. And some of the things we'll be doing deeper looks back into the universe.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for your time today. This is also very exciting and can't wait to see what the future holds. Thank you again. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.